Welcome to this lesson, which is all things the anatomy of a workbook. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do some actual page layout. Along the way, I'll teach you some tips and tricks to make things a little bit faster. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and jump across now. Beautiful. So you can see here, we've got our beautifully blocked out template ready to go. We've added all the content in the previous training. Now let's get started with the cover first. So covers are an interesting thing because they really can make or break your product. If your cover isn't strong, if it's not clearly readable from a distance, people won't be able to understand exactly what it is and they won't understand the value of it either. So let's jump in. Let's make our beautiful cover here. To start with, I'm going to create a little logo. Basically, I just stylize the text in quite a simple way. I like to make sure that I like to sort of create a hierarchy. So you can see Dreamy Workbook is like the first hierarchy, and then we've got Mini Course, which is the second hierarchy. Beautiful. So you can see I've laid that out. I feel like this line could be just a touch thicker, but this is really easy to read. There's a clear hierarchy. We're not reading a whole chunk of words at once. We read Dreamy Workbook and then we read Mini Course. Next up, I'm going to add a bit of color just towards the bottom. I'm going to make this like a charcoal. And this is where you'll typically put your business name. So I'm going to put Digital Offer Builders, as that's ours. But obviously you can put your website, you can just put your business name, whatever you want. Beautiful. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of color just behind this section here. I'm going to center that text to the color as well. I might go for like a little bit of a cream color. Pull that out. And now finally, I'm going to add a photo just into the background. I find that adding like a scene or a photo adds a lot to a cover. So let's go into elements. I've got some photos that I've uploaded here, so I'm going to have a look through and I might choose this one here and just adjust it a little bit so we can see those beautiful flowers. Beautiful, looking really good. It can just be sort of generically relevant to it, that's totally fine. It just adds a little bit of extra texture. Now, my top tips for covers: make the title quite simple and self-explanatory. You always want your customer to be able to sort of see from a distance and understand exactly what this is. They need to be able to know that this is the Dreamy Workbook Mini Course from a distance. Now, one final thing I'm going to add to this, I'm just going to clearly put that it's a workbook at the top. Make this just a touch bigger. I might bring that down there. I think that looks quite good. Lovely. I might make it come down a little bit lower. I think that looks really balanced and finished. So another top tip, try and tie in your colors to your actual branding colors. And if you can, use some sort of imagery or photography on the cover. Even if it's a photo of you, that would be amazing. It really adds a lot of color and depth to your cover when you do this, and it makes it feel just really up leveled. So let's jump into the next page, which is the table of contents. So what I want to do here, I'm going to start with, I'm going to align it. And then I'll pull out the title. Now, one tool I love to use in Canva is the paint roller tool. So if I right click, go copy style, click here, it's going to actually copy across that font style. Obviously I want it a little bit smaller for this page, but it can save a lot of time and it helps you keep things consistent over your workbook. Now on this page, I'm going to add a bit of a flat color. Beautiful. I'm going to add just a bit of a block behind it. Lovely. Now I'm going to sort of stylize this a little bit more. So I'm going to actually pull these ones out because they're sort of like, I guess they would sort of be subsections. And I'm also going to, okay, I'm just styling all this text. Beautiful. You can see that contents is looking quite good now. So I'm going to actually add an area for a photo. I might actually put this all the way behind. Make this just a touch bigger. Beautiful. I'm going to do all the photos last, so for now I'll just block them in with an empty frame like this. Another important area of a workbook is what is called a section divider. So this is quite similar to a cover, but basically they will divide up the sections, so it's very easy for at a glance someone to look and sort of see where they can find information that they're looking for. Typically it will be sort of like a subheader for a whole section. You can see in my workbook here, I've got why create a beautiful workbook. So maybe beautiful workbook 101 would be a great section divider. Let's create a new page. Now, typically I like to go like a little bit darker when it comes to these section dividers. I might do like a charcoal, and I'm going to actually grab this beautiful image from the front page. I'm going to adjust it and make it like fairly transparent, just so it's sort of in the background very, very slightly. Now I'm going to copy and paste this beautiful logo that we created from the front cover. I'm just going to put it here, change all the text to white, just so it's quite inverted. Lovely. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to adjust this sort of title from the next page and just turn it into a summary heading. Beautiful workbooks. Beautiful. Now I'll make this bigger so it's the first hierarchy. Make this just a touch smaller. So it very much is just like an element that's sort of accompanying this one. Now I'm going to add in some sort of lines that I guess will frame this and just add like a little bit more interest to the page. So I'm going to go with like a white line. Beautiful. And I might even pop this up a little bit higher and add a line here, just so it's a bit divided. I want to make sure that this is the same thickness. So I've got 3. I'll change this one to 3 as well. I want to make sure that the line doesn't go over the edge. It looks good. Now let's center this to this sort of lower panel, and this here can be centered to the top panel. Beautiful. That's looking fantastic. So beautiful workbooks 101. So now we can use this as a template for our other section dividers. For example, our plan out your workbook section. We can copy and paste this just at the beginning of it, and we'll change this to plan out your workbook. Beautiful. I'm just going to center it again. We might even adjust this to include like a little icon. I think that could be quite nice. So I'm going to include like a circle here. I'll center it. I'll put like a little icon just in the middle. We might make this black. We'll make the icon white. Lovely. Oh, we might make the icon like a gray. Yeah, that looks good. Very subtle. We'll make it look just a touch smaller. Now we can put that there as well. It just kind of fills up the space because the 101 here is massive and it takes up the space really nicely, but it doesn't really work when there's not as much text. So adding that icon really finishes it. Beautiful. So we've got plan out. Then we've got batch creation. And then we have final notes. So that's how I would go about adding my section dividers. They really make a big difference when it comes to people, I guess, looking at your workbook from a distance. It's very easy to see what's located where. So very important to do, and they look fantastic as well. Now let's jump onto this page. This is more of a content heavy page. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to start by pulling out some of the headings. We've got our main page header here. We've got what I would call intro text. So intro text is typically a little bit bigger than standard body copy text. And usually our main header is going to be the biggest header on the page. Now I'm going to add a block of color just to kind of separate this out from everything else. It's not going to be an intense block of color or anything like that, just something fairly neutral and light, but it does create that sense of, I guess, separation between these two areas. Now I'm going to use the same font for this subheader here, but it's not going to be as big because this is just a subheader, so it can be a little bit smaller. I'm actually not a fan of this font in a smaller subheader style, so I'm actually going to go, I'll grab this sort of more minimal version. I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger. I might actually centralize this whole section, so beautiful. You can see these two lines here. I've tried to space them fairly evenly. Now this content here, this would be a great area for us to include some icons. So we've got this, you can see this here is like our little sub header. And then we've got our little bit of wording that goes underneath it. Now I'm going to make this 8-point size. 8-point size is perfect for any body copy. So all of your words should typically be 8-point. Unless you're dealing with like a slightly older audience, then I would recommend 9-point. Beautiful. Okay, so I've got that. Now I'm going to start by sort of roughly laying all of these little dot points out. I'll pull out this little conclusion at the bottom. I might actually put the conclusion into its own little, I guess, strip of color at the bottom and pull out. So there you have it. The more you can break things up, the easier it's going to be for people to be able to actually process the content that you're giving them. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I might even turn this into almost like a little grid, because with the header, we will have 8 sections, which will make a really cool little grid. Now, sometimes when you have lines like this, they may not be perfectly straight. If you go to position, you can see here, this is 90.2. That's why it's kind of showing up a little bit wobbly. So all we want to do is go minus 90 just to get it perfectly straight. Again, I'm going to go into position and just make it 0. I'm going to pull this out just so it's the perfect width for what I want. Now I'm going to go and space this out. So I've got an even section for each one. So you can see I've blocked out the sections here. If I now go and select all of those lines and go to position, I can now hit tidy up. It's going to space them out perfectly. So let's use this one as a bit of a template. I actually feel like that header at the top is just a little touch too big. So I just like to delete the text as I'm sort of copying it out. Just helps me keep track of where I'm at. Beautiful. So you can see I've laid this all out. Now what I want to do is I'm going to add like a little icon for each of these. So I'm going to go to elements. I'm going to go up to search elements. I'm going to look for some little icons which will be relevant. So let's look for design icon. Up in the top right corner, you can see there's a small toggle. I'm going to go down and I'm going to select free. It's very important if you're going to share this as a template that you only use free elements in it. Otherwise, your customer is going to get asked to pay when they go to download it. So you want to make sure that you are only using free icons. You also want to choose ones which look fairly similar. You can see I'm going for what's called a monoline look here. This is where there's like a bit of an outline. You want to make sure the outline and the thickness of that outline is the same on all the icons, or at least very, very similar. You also want to make sure that visually they look like they're the same size. Now, when you're adding icons as well, by default, they'll be added at slightly all different colors. So you want to go through, you want to make sure they're all the same color. Beautiful. And this can just be a little bit more centered. I might even create like a little bit of color behind this section here. Beautiful. I feel like these could be a slightly lighter gray. Yeah, that looks a little bit softer, which is nice. Beautiful. So this page looks like it's almost done. I don't think this text is sitting perfectly for me. So I'm going to pull this out. Reasons to create a beautiful workbook. I'm going to make this its own sort of almost logo as well. I'm just going to curve that text. I'll make it a little bit smaller. I might also add a book icon in there. Beautiful. So this page now looks finished. Now let's move on to a questions page. So questions are obviously something that people are going to want to fill out as they're working in your workbook. So we're going to need sort of like an area that people can write in. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start pulling out some questions. I'm going to create like a little area just for the questions up here. So you can put it outside of the box, you can put it inside of the box. It's really up to you. I think for the purpose of this workbook, it'll look a lot neater if I just put it inside the box. Now what I like to do as well is I like to grab out one of the longest questions just to see how it's going to look. That looks good. Beautiful. Now I'm going to tally up all of the questions. Now what I might do, because some of these questions have like a little bit of a header here, I'm going to put the header here and I'm going to create a second style for the actual question. We'll bring that down to 8 point, and I might make it an italic one. Beautiful. I think that looks quite good. I think having the title there and that, I think the question can be slightly bigger. I think it looks quite good. Now I'm going to tally up all of the questions. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And this one here is an exercise. So I'm going to add this onto its own blank page for later, because we're going to turn this page into more of a, I guess, like an elaborate fillable area. And we're going to have 4 of these on each page. Beautiful. You can see that fits quite nicely. Lovely. I'm also going to create a section header here. So I'm going to have plan out your workbook as my header. Let's pop it up here. So now I've got this beautiful template because I'm going to have 4 on each page. I'm just going to duplicate this page and I'm going to start copying and pasting in all of the questions. Beautiful. So you can see I've gone ahead and I've pulled out some of these text boxes just to be a bit wider. You always want to keep lines like this fairly similar in length. If you have like one word that's sort of like off the bottom, you always want to enter down that line and make sure you don't leave a word on its own, just because it looks a bit strange. Now up to this section here. So break down your content into the section divider header and then how many pages will be included. So what I'm going to do here is a little bit more of an elaborate layout. Keep that header. So we'll put section divider name. I'm going to leave space for a little icon here. I'm going to insert a line. Beautiful. I'll make sure that looks fairly well spaced. Now I'm going to have some lines here for people to list the page types. Beautiful. So you can see I've laid this out and it's ready for me to duplicate. I'm just going to touch this up just a tiny bit. Beautiful. So I'm going to just select it all and I'm just going to duplicate it. You can see it's a little bit close to the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to adjust this header and make it a touch smaller, just to give us a little bit more space around the edge. Lovely. So I'm going to add just a duplicate of this page so that they have the option to add lots and lots of sections. I'm just going to touch this up a little bit, just make sure that it's all even. When you're working with a workbook, it's very important to make sure that the details are there so that things are aligned, things are even. If you need to go in and just really align things and touch things up, it really makes a huge difference. Beautiful. So now I'm going to create what's called a checklist. So this page here, it's more of a checklist style. It's going to have like basically the option for them to go through and tick off the things that they want to include inside their workbook. So I'm going to go and copy this header again. I'll put this at the top. And I might also just add a bit of descriptive text, just explaining exactly what they're supposed to do on this page. All right, so I think roughly, is there an even number? There's an odd number. So typically when we've got an odd number, you want to make sure that you put the first column with the most and then the second column will have the least. Now, because this is a checklist, we're going to left align everything. We're going to space it out. Beautiful. Now I'm going to actually have some spaces here where they can fill in their own ones if they want to. I'm going to hit C on my keyboard to create the little checkbox to start with. I'm just going to create like a little checkbox for each of these. I'm holding Shift on my keyboard and I'm holding Alt to duplicate them. So instead of copying and pasting, you can just click, hold Alt and Shift and drag. Makes it quite a lot quicker. Beautiful. Now you can see those aren't perfect. So what I like to do is line up the first one and the last one, make sure that's perfect. Select them all, then go back into position, go tidy up, and it's going to tweak it a little bit. Now I'm going to create those extra ones that I wanted where they can fill it out and add their own. Beautiful. I'm just going to make it the same line width. I'm going to group these together actually. Beautiful. I might actually include like an area for a photo just down the bottom here. I think that will look quite nice. Now we can select all of these, Alt and Shift to duplicate, just drag it across to the next row. We want to make sure that it is the same distance. I think that looks quite good. Now we want to select everything and we're just going to center it. Beautiful. So this page, we just need one more. And now this page is all done. So that brings us to the end of sort of the essentials that you need when it comes to laying out a beautiful workbook. We've been through sort of like general page layout, cover design, table of contents, sort of those fillable areas for things like questions and prompts. And finally, we've included a checklist as well. So I hope you have a bit of a foundational knowledge. Don't forget, I will include all of these templates with this training as well. So make sure you grab a copy so you can sort of use them to fast track your workbook creation. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next lesson.